Okay.
Okay.
It's going.
Okay. So here's our third podcast. We have Brother Angelus joining us from St. Benedict's Abbey here. We're going to have Brother Levin joining us pretty soon, I believe, to talk about the first 4 chapters of the second book. So Brother Angelus, to catch you up to speed here in our podcasting, we have done podcasts we did book 1 up through, we had one podcast, book 1 up through chapter 4.
Mm-hmm.
And then
I've been an eger listener.
Yeah, brother's been listening.
Oh, that's right. That's right. So you don't need to be caught up, right? And then we, then we figured we could not leave the elders chapter off. So we did our own podcast just on the elders chapter. Now we're moving into the next 4 chapters, which are in book 2 here as they arrive at the monastery. And we're very, very happy to have people living in a monastery talking to us about the arrival at the monastery and what's going on here. So, this is exciting. Unfortunately, we have to do this over Zoom right now, but hopefully in the future we'll be meeting together to have these.
We'll arrive at the monastery, hopefully.
That's right.
Which character will you be?
I'll play the buffoon.
But it won't be playing, will it? So this is very informal, Brother Angelus. You've heard our podcast. We just chit chat.
This is great.
Anything interesting that happened that you want to bring out? Just jump right to it.
I guess for me, one question. It comes up a little bit later, but this should kind of be on the back of everyone's mind at this point. How did this get arranged? How is it that everyone got invited to go to the monastery to meet with Zosima? Mm-hmm. Where did this come from? And what were the real reasons behind this invitation and behind this meeting? I think you have on the surface the purpose of this meeting, but as you see from the second page or the third page of book 2, that purpose had no chances of being successful. It was pretty clear that this was a dead before it even left the.
What they do say what the purpose is. Does it have to do with Dimitri's?
Yeah, to try to resolve the financial dispute between Fyodor and Dmitri. But
I'm trying to remember. Does Dmitri call the meeting?
I don't. Well, no. It in some ways it is. It's Fyodor, which is the one that is kind of officially behind this, but what comes up a little bit later, end of book 2, I believe. So it was not quite there yet, but it also, I'll spill the beans. You get a little indication that it was actually Ivan that wanted Fyodor to meet here.
Okay, well, so page 51 in the Elders chapter, about halfway down there, they're talking about this meeting. It was at this time the meeting, or rather gathering of the members of the inharmonious family, took place in the cell of the elder, who had such an extraordinary influence on Alyosha. The pretext for this gathering was a false one. So he kind of says it right off the bat there. It was at this time that the discord between Dmitri and his father seemed at its acutest stage, and their relations had become insufferably strained. Fyodor Pavlovich seemed to have been the first to suggest, apparently in joke, that they should all meet in Father Zosima's cell, and that without appealing to his direct intervention, they might more decently come to an understanding under the conciliating influence of the elder's presence. So it seems like Dmitri and his father are at their worst now in this fight about basically the inheritance. The father, Fyodor, is the one who suggests meeting in front of Father Zosima, not to even ask him like his advice on this, but just because his presence will be some sort of a, I guess, sort of a peace-inducing influence on the members as they talk about this sort of stressful stressful situation here. But I circled that apparently in joke, and I'm wondering about this.
So I don't want to. I'm just going to jump ahead to something that we're not. It's actually the next part, but I think it kind of might frame some things. So I don't know if this is cheating or not. So this is on page 96. I won't give too much of what's going on here. It's at the very bottom of page 96.
And can you give sub chapters for me?
Oh yeah, sure. Sorry, this is like the last few sentences of book 2.
The scandalous scene,
right before
chapter
book 3. In some ways, it's one of the last things that is said in the book, book 2. That is. After a pause, a few minutes, looking askance at his son. Why, it was you got up all this monastery business. You urged it. You approved of it. Why are you angry now? And he's speaking to Ivan. And so this is Fyodor speaking, saying, you're the one that was kind of all behind this. Why are you so upset now about this? So I think there's something interesting going on in regards to what role does Ivan play here. Early on in what we read, I forget which subsection, it made reference to Ivan being able to control his father and basically keep him from being a buffoon, but he's not doing it. And Alyosha's kind of annoyed with Ivan for not controlling his father.
No, his father's a disaster.
His father just is like completely unhinged. Once the clock strikes the start, it's like beginning of a boxing match, and he just comes out being an utter idiot.
Yeah.
And Ivan's just watching it all, kind of, as if he has nothing to do with this. But all along, Alyosha knows that he could stop this if he wanted to.
So obviously he doesn't want to for some reason.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
So I think there's something like what are the purposes of this meeting? And if it's to settle financial matters, it seems like nonsense. It seems like this is one of the worst plans you could ever come up with. Try to use Zosima to settle financial matters.
Yeah, he's probably worse than Alyosha when it comes to money, right?
Yeah.
The great quotes we had from the last podcast about
the
2 podcasts ago about Alyosha and money, and
not
you'd either blow it or give it to some rogue.
Yeah, right.
Or just would sit around and he wouldn't know what to do with it.
Right.
Probably Zosima's like that times 10.
Right. So anyway, I think it's just worth keeping in the back of your mind what is the purpose of this, because it doesn't really seem like they accomplish anything, and it actually makes it even worse. The situation seems to just escalate in a negative way because of this meeting.
Now, don't get too far past chapter 4, though.
No, I know, but you come in.
I'm not too far.
By the end of chapter 4, you recognize that it's getting worse.
Yeah.
And Dimitri's not even there.
Yeah,
So,
he hasn't even shown up, right?
Yeah.
And there's this huge pause, right, where Zosima goes out to talk to the pilgrim.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think that's the purpose of the meeting. Sometimes gets lost because of the circus that's happening.
Yeah. It's in chapter 6, so I won't say too much. But I think there's signs later when Ivan and Zosimov have that exchange about his article that I think he has a sort of there's an almost genuine curiosity for all of them about Zosimov. I mean, they kind of, do this formalistic thing or ridicule him in their way. But on the other hand, each of the characters actually shows that there's something arresting about Zosimov's presence. So I wonder if Ivan even just wants to meet him.
Mm-hmm.
Because the other thing too is the word that keeps coming up with Karamazovs is they're sensualists, right? So like there's something very instinctual about all of the Karamazovs. So even if like the occasion of the meeting is sort of a prank or something, even maybe Yvonne has some other purposes, but still, I think it's almost something instinctual. Like, let's just see what happens.
So they have like an instinct to sort of, they're like attracted to Zosima and sort of the monastic life, or that they're instinctual in the sense that they just act on their whims.
I think both.
Oh, okay.
I think clearly the latter, but I think but each of the I'm going to try to keep within, because I think I'm spilling into the second half of the book too. But I think each of them have a moment where they really are struck by Zosimov. So both the father. I'm thinking the father. I think all three of them. And Alyosha too, because he's sort of in awe of like the fact that he's just he's not disturbed by any of this. That Zosimov is not. So I think there's something very attractive about Zosimov beyond his financial abilities.
Yeah. Or inability.
And this brings up something I kind of wanted to. I don't know if this is anathema, but touch on something you said in the last podcast.
Nothing is anathema.
No.
Nothing is anathema.
That's right. Everything is permitted now. Once God is gone. So, which is a sort of the question of realism in Alyosha.
Yeah.
And whether he's an ideologue or not. And I think the evidence for, I would say that he's not, is his relationship with Zosima. Because, or I would frame it this way. I think the way the book sets it up, and you guys framed it, was really useful. Is like, basically, what's the difference between Christianity and socialism? Right? And I think it's the difference between an ideal and a dream. Right? So socialism is this. There's this dream. I want this sort of unity of mankind and the great Russian sort of idea, and then I then have to seize the means to make that happen. So it's always this deferred, far off thing. Then we scheme and whatnot. But the ideal I think you see in Alyosha is, and sort of the whole Christian proposal is that like there's something present right now which awakens and meets these deep desires of the heart. So I found like the whole description of Alyosha is like, well, there's immortality, so I'll give my whole life to it. To me, that's like very much a realist position.
Right. The way I was thinking of it was that Alyosha has a dream similar to the socialist dream. He doesn't think it's the socialist dream, but in some sense, without fully recognizing it, he has something kind of more than the dream, more real than the dream, and that's Zosima. And so he kind of sees in Zosima this reality that he thinks corresponds to this dream, not realizing that what really matters is the immanence, the presence of Zosima, and like the reality of Christianity. And he kind of doesn't fully understand what he's got, if you want to put it that way. And so he kind of thinks Zosima is this guy that's incredible, cling to him, live with him. But yet he kind of is unclear about whether that's for the sake of being able to realize this dream, which will one day happen. So the way I was thinking of it is that he's kind of torn, not quite understanding how he's torn. He has this, I want something more than Zosima, and Zosima is going to kind of bring it about. But I also know that Zosima is the fullness of why I'm a Christian, why I don't turn to socialism. I don't know. I think it's, and I think that kind of the way his character develops is a realizing that we don't live for a dream, we live for reality, and that's that's fully present to us. And so he kind of gives up the socialist, I don't know if you want to call it the socialist Christian, ideology, or the the idea of, worldly brotherly love coming all about and throughout some sort of, Christian means. I think he kind of gives that up for a much more incarnational, real version of Christianity. I don't know. But I think you're totally right that it's what makes him different is that he has Zosima, which is like the sort of the anchor to his dream, and that's what makes it not entirely an ideology, but I think he's still thinking along those concepts, along that I don't know if that makes sense.
So in a sense, Zosima maybe is a concrete redemption of him from sort of a dream-esque way of understanding the fulfillment of Christianity.
Yeah,
like he living with him and seeing him and being with him is itself sort of this is what Christianity is.
Yeah, it's kind of like he knows Zosima's like the culmination of the Christian life, but he doesn't quite understand how or why or to what purpose. I don't know. And so the way I was thinking of it initially, it was the culmination because he's pushing towards this other goal, which isn't fully given to him. And then it's
speaking of culminations, Brother Levin has entered the room.
Oh, sweet.
So we should probably wrap this up.
That's a great conversation, guys. Thank you so much.
Brother Levin, how are you?
It's good to see you, brother.
I'm doing well. How are you guys?
Great.
Great.
Well, if you want to, we can dive into the arrival at the monastery here.
All right.
Jonathan Francois sent us an email asking if we could talk about what happens right as Zosima kind of comes out, which is this ritualistic bowing that happens on page 40.
There's another bow that I think you might be referencing.
That happens later.
But
okay.
But I think they're tied up.
Okay.
So go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So I don't know if you guys are interested in talking about that.
What chapter is it?
This is chapter 2.
Yeah.
The Old Buffoon. My page 40 here.
It's the like the second paragraph or so. Like first.
Oh
yeah.
Yeah, let me read a little bit of this, and then maybe we can talk about it. Okay, so this is actually it's at the top, right at that first full paragraph, right? Father Zosima was accompanied by a novice and by Alyosha. The two monks rose and greeted him with a very deep bow, touching the ground with their fingers, then kissed his hand. Blessing them, the elder replied with as deep a reverence to them and asked their blessing. The whole ceremony was performed very seriously and with an appearance of feeling, not like an everyday rite. But Muisaf, however you pronounce that, fancied that it was all done with intentional impressiveness. He stood in front of the other visitors. He had reflected upon it the evening before, from simple politeness, since it was the custom here to have gone up to reverence the elder's blessing, even if he did not kiss his hand. But when he saw all this bowing and kissing on the part of the monks, he instantly changed his mind. With dignified gravity, he made a rather deep, conventional bow and moved away to a chair. Fyodor Pavlovich did the same, mimicking Muisaf like an ape. Ivan bowed with great dignity and courtesy, but he too kept his hands at his sides, while Kalganov was so confused he did not bow at all. And then this next sentence I wanted to ask about too. The elder let fall the hand raised to bless them, and bowing to them again, asked them all to sit down. The blood rushed Alyosha's cheeks. He was ashamed. His forebodings were coming true. So this very sort of ritualistic thing that's happening with the monks pisses off his uncle / cousin or whatever, however the relation is, because he had said before in the chapter before that, 2 pages before, he says, "The devil take them," talking about the monks, An outer show elaborated through centuries and nothing but charlatanism and nonsense underneath. And I have a feeling that thought comes to the fore as he watches this sort of ritualistic sort of honoring of the other that's happening.
And Musov's whole point of attending this, I mean, it was to sort of settle fishing rights stuff and what have you for the land, but he's more interested in just seeing what's going on at the monastery, just sort of observing. He's just out of like intrigue to like see. And what you get right off the bat is he can only see in the monastery his way of living, so that everything he sees there just seems like show. It's just all fake, right? All there is the world of business or the world of, you know, whatever. And so when he gets there, everything that happens he has to interpret as empty, because when you live an empty life, you kind of are only going to like see that. So
yeah, I was thinking that exact same thing.
Yeah,
I was thinking that exact same thing. That he can only see that a human would act as he acts.
Yeah.
And therefore, seeing something like this, he can't open himself up to the sort of possibility of another way of seeing the world.
Right.
Instead, it's all show.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you get in this one moment kind of a microcosm of one of the big questions of the book with the church. Is it just a formalistic thing that's really just about power and money and influence, or is there something real? Mm-hmm. And so in this moment, like, is this just formalism, an empty ritual, or is it a real gesture that has reality and has meaning for each of the people doing it, even though they do it all the time because of the monastery. I think it's really interesting because you really get like the whole book right here. I remember last semester or something. There's a priest who comes to BC who's by ritual. He's Roman rite and Byzantine, Eastern Catholic rite, I think. Anyways, so he celebrated the Divine Liturgy here and invited the students to come, and I came too, and kind of in the homily explained some of the things, and had a kind of Q&A at the end too. And one of the students, I think, asked, "What's with the bow?" Because it's in the Divine Liturgy, the bow that touches the ground. What's the significance of that? And it's because God became man, right? It's because the earth is now like sacred because Christ walked on it. So like you already brought up this whole like question of incarnational Christianity, which is, you know, the only Christianity, but it's right here in that vow. Everybody else, and they do it with great feeling because like this is the reality they're living, is that God became man and dwelt among us, so that we might become God. And but everybody else, you're right, it's like the cipher. Everybody else responds in what they want to sort of make the meaning out of. Mm-hmm. Whether, you know, whatever it is, you bow conventionally or with your hands at your side or not at all. So I think it's this fundamental difference right away of is there meaning in the world precisely because God is the creator and revealed and came among us and we respond to that, or do I have to sort of play this game of formalistic, you know, ritual to kind of, you know, get my fishing rights or whatever it is.
Yeah. And one of the themes that Jeremy and I thought this book was about, we were thinking it's a book about beauty. And I think it was in the first conversation we had, it's in the Idiot, where the character says, beauty will save the world. And I think it's a very important theme for Dostoyevsky, which is, can you find in the appearance of something, that is in the sort of what people would say the surface, something more than it, right? So when you look at something, does it show more than itself? And I think what you have going on is that you're only going to see the bow as conveying something more than just a meaningless routine gesture if you have the eyes of being able to see beauty, right? And so beauty understood not as like prettiness, but as kind of the way it's sometimes put is like, you know, being able to see an icon for an icon, an image of something more than itself. And I think that what you have here is the bow had the appearance not of an everyday rite. It had, you know, seemingly deep meaning to it, but then you have the same guy viewing it as the exact opposite. I think it's just kind of the way in which these two different people see things, which is the one person sees it as a beautiful act, and the other just fails to see it for what it for that.
Worse, sees it as a empty show,
yeah.
right? Attempting to look like something that it's not.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really important thing. As I read this, I read The Brothers Cave 13 years ago in the novitiate, and this is my next time picking it up.
Yeah.
And I remember at the time having the same impression of the scenes on with Father Zosima and the peasants. I don't read the peasants as necessarily presenting to the reader, rendered for the reader as having some peak form of spiritual union with God. I think they're rendered to show a little bit of superstition, a little bit of just a degradation of religion that Father Zosima's wisdom contrasts with, and he's very patient, and he's you know, prompting them back to the right way. But his advice to both Fyodor and then to Madame Holikov is the same: don't lie to yourself. And so I think this idea of a triumphalism of show, as an ultimate form of lying to yourself, I think is kind of put forward too, not to undermine a true notion of true religion, but to let, like, Father Zosima shines clearly because he's set in place with these people who, you know, incline towards superstition. They're not fake, but they incline towards superstition. But his sound wisdom, his earthiness, his reverencing, his true reverencing of others in the bow even, looks more clear with the contrast. The true religion is more clear in him in that way.
Yeah, and I think there's something admirable in the peasants' simplicity, or maybe even superstition. They realize that there is something. There's something more to the faith than simply a show, like just years of undergoing the same activity just because that's just what we do. And Yusov sort of knows he needs to pay respect to Zosima, and he gets really pissed at Fyodor for not doing that. But why does he pay respect to him? And it's just simply because that's what you do to elders. There's no real reason why he should respect this old guy. He doesn't really feel it, and that's why you kind of oddly, it's kind of a break of like the narrator. It's odd. You get the narrator's kind of this third person, but at the same time you get the thoughts of Yusov, which is kind of this weird thing going on. But with Yusov, you realize that he wants to respect Zosima, but he has really no reason for doing so. Where the peasants, I think they, in their just utter simplicity and even sort of their superstition, they are faithful. It's just they're not quite sure how to bring that to fruition. I don't know how to put it, but I get the impression that they're not approaching the faith as this lofty idea. I mean, they're all suffering, or at least most of them are suffering, and so they're approaching it like with earnestness, where the others, I think, don't think about the faith.
And so what I have in mind, where I think they're rendered in a way that is that you're not to like, you're not merely to praise these people and say this is the way to salvation, is for me it's on page 52, but that would be the second, third, fourth, fifth full paragraph of chapter 3. The narrator, who presents a more or less reliable reporting tone, talks about essentially like a placebo effect for healings. So the women think they're being healed by the sacraments, but what it is aroused by the expectation of miracle, the implicit belief that it will come to pass. It does come to pass. So there's a psychosomatic response, and it's not. He doesn't say it in such a way where it undercuts the importance or the value of the faith. It works alongside it. But what it does is it does impact how we receive the peasants, following the narrator. And so I think I'm running along the same trail as you're talking about, Andy, because I think that they look a lot better than Musov and certainly Fyodor, who are stultified by their behavior. The peasants are not stultified by the narrator.
And they're coming to Zosima to receive something. They know he has quote unquote, has something that they want to receive, and they're completely open to that. And that's kind of what their faith consists in, is this openness to receive whatever wisdom he has to impart, where that's not at all really, I mean, that's the pretext for the Fyodor and Dmitri. They're meeting there presumably to receive this wisdom from Zosima, but that's not at all why they're going there. Whereas the peasants really do have this. I mean, they all changed their lives because of Zosima, right? They've all, whether it's small or large, they all leave greatly changed because of him. So their faith might be in their openness to change.
I think there's something about their, most of these people that come to him, they all come from really far away, like hundreds of miles to see Father Zosima. And then you have, the Karamazov family that's, walking across the lawn to go see him as a joke, right? And there's this great contrast. So I think, there is something that they see, that these peasants see, whether they're seeing it totally correctly or not, but there's something that they see in Father Zosima that's hugely contrasted with what the Karamazovs are doing, right? Besides Alyosha, of course, right?
Yeah. And it's the abrupt change. It's like right in the middle of Fyodor being the complete buffoon, and Zosima just stands up and leaves. So you get a very clear contrast being made between why these people came and why these other people came.
So here's a question. Why does he leave in the middle of the conversation? I mean, the conversation's ridiculous, right? And, but I don't think Zosima would be offended and like, I can't stand for this. I was wondering, is it like a sort of a monastery bell thing? Like, okay, I have to go talk to the peasants. I always do it this time. And you just have to hold off for now. Or was it an attempt to get them to sort of, I guess, overcome themselves? Not because he felt disrespected, but for their own sake of living like a true life in the midst of a true conversation that they're supposed to be having here. Like, is it in a sense a pedagogical thing that he gets up and leaves, or is it like a sort of an obligation thing to his peasants, or what do you guys think about this kind of abrupt stand up, I got to go talk to the peasants thing?
Yeah, I think it might be both. I mean, there's kind of just a literal level that they've been waiting for a while, and he probably wants to come see them, and maybe there's something regular to it.
And they were there before the
right.
the guys came, yeah.
Yeah. But then I think, yeah, I mean, the pedagogical aspect, he's responded to Fyodor at this point, right? He's sort of given him a word, like, you know what you have to do. Don't give yourself to drunkenness, incontinence of speech, etc. And it's obvious at this point that they're performing for him. So I think there is an aspect of, okay, he's spoken into the situation, he's held it, and then he gives them space to like look at themselves without an audience, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe he's old. Maybe his legs are tired. I don't know.
They were bent, I think they said.
But I'll also point out Musov's insult, "You defile everything you touch."
Yeah.
That might be the peak of his acrimony. And maybe there's a charity there by him getting up, him realizing that he's the object of attention, Zosima. They're talking to each other, but it's like performing in front of someone, right? And he's the audience. Mm-hmm. And so it might have been a moment of him saying, okay, this is about enough. I'll get up and bless. I need to bless the peasants anyways. Mm-hmm. So I'll go do it. Then I'll come back and we can reset.
Because it's the very next sentence after "you defile everything you touch." The elder suddenly rose from his seat.
Oh yeah.
Right. So it's the very next thing that happens.
Yeah, I think I would be interested to go into what you were talking about, Brother Levin, this idea, and Jager, you were bringing it up too, about knowing yourself, where he starts, when he speaks his word, as you were saying, Brother Angelus, about the drunkenness, incontinence of speech, love of money, sensual lust. Above all, he says, this is page 45 here, this is the old buffoon chapter near the end.
Yeah, I don't know, maybe a page and a half before the end of it.
He says, above all, don't lie. He says, you mean about Diderot? No, not about Diderot. Above all, don't lie to yourself. The man who lies to himself and listens to his own lie comes to such a pass that he cannot distinguish the truth within him or around him, which is kind of going back to this idea of the bowing, right? And Musov's sort of reaction to it. And so loses all respect for himself and for others. And having no respect, he ceases to love. And in order to occupy and distract himself without love, he gives way to passions and coarse pleasures, sinks to bestiality and his vices, all from continual lying to other men and to himself. So there's this link that he has with lying to yourself and not loving, which of course for Zosima, is going to be the heart of what it means to live in this world, is to love, right? And so the fact that you don't love and that the cause of that is lying to yourself means that you have to be true to yourself.
And I think lying to yourself gives you a false view, or puts you in a situation where you're going to view reality incorrectly or falsely, so that you can't actually come to know something if you don't first know yourself. And so if you lie to yourself, then of course you're going to be set up to now read into what's happening before you in a false way. Mm-hmm. And this I think ties up with what we were talking about earlier with the bow and viewing something as beauty, and sort of coming to know the truth is going to require a truthfulness in yourself, and therefore an openness to what's before you. And I think he's tying together the do not lie to yourself with those performative theses that occurred earlier on with all the bowing and what have you. I think it's a tying together of maybe beauty and truth.
This also seems to be the root of monasticism, and then further than that, specifically the elder tradition. If you go back to page 27 on the chapter on the elders, where he's talking about this elder tradition and what happened, and I brought this up last podcast. It says that the point of the elder, right, is after a life of obedience to attain perfect freedom. That is from self, to escape the lot of those who have lived their whole life without finding their true selves in themselves. And I wonder if this idea of the true self isn't linked with this lying to yourself, and that the whole point of monasticism and the elder sort of submission to the elder is ultimately being true to yourself, or not lying to yourself, that leads to love, right?
Yeah.
Go ahead, brother.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll just link up what you're saying there, Jeremy, with the description of the elder. And I don't have the page exactly, the paragraph, but it was this kind of hyperbolic description of obedience, of this revelation of self to the elder. And then, like, you have to be so obedient that not even, ecclesial superiors far above the elder can dispense you from it, that a coffin will fly out of a church if you've been disobedient. And yeah, and again, there's on that one, he says, this of course is only an old legend. And so again, you have this, I don't know, like this flattening of the grandiose aspects of and superstitious aspects of religious miracles. Again, not, and I don't think he does that to pull away their value and their meaning. And there is praise of miracles. There is a realism about miracles that he mentions, but the idea that the elder becomes a true guide for you, so that you don't lie to yourself, I think is the point. The centrality of the elder position, in other words, is to help you not do this lying, this falseness toward yourself.
And I think that, so I taught this book, actually Jeremy read it as well, Father Norris Clark's Person and Being, where he talks about being as relational, or being as relation. And so to think about what a person is this relational being, and so that one's existence is sort of tied up with another, and therefore the understanding of what one is also tied up with the other. So you sort of have to go out of yourself in order to fully understand yourself. So you have to, the Father only understands himself, in the Son. And I think the idea of lying to oneself is also tied up with the inability to love in that passage there. And I think what love is, how it's characterized here, is this sort of giving of oneself to another. And it's only in that you're actually going to truly understand who you are, what you are. And it looks like those that don't love, of course, are going to lie to themselves, because they're not going to have any ability to know themselves, because they don't love. So it seems that love is tied up with not lying to yourself. And I'm sure, I don't know Scripture well enough, but I'm sure you could, what must I do to gain eternal life? Tie that up with the great commandment of love. I'm sure there's something that can be done there, exegetically or what have you. But it seems that love is the means by which you come to know yourself.
Yeah, and also, yeah, just to relate to, you talked about being as a relation. When he sums up his discussion of an elder, what is an elder? An elder was one who took your soul, your will, into his own soul and in his will. So that this union of relation that you talked about, it fits in perfectly with that.
Yeah. And I think that also comes up later on with some of the peasant women. The one who left her husband because her fourth son died. And how I thought this one was incredibly moving. She can't forget him, the child, that is, but at the same time, she kind of wants to forget him, it seems, because if she could forget him, she wouldn't suffer anymore. And I think there's this this revelation that Zosima sort of imparts on her, that it's not for you to forget him, and therefore it's not for you to not suffer. That's part of what can make this suffering itself joyful, is that you don't forget him, because in some ways you're tied to him and he's tied to you. And likewise, don't forget, you're also tied to your husband who you just left, and this is going to like destroy the relationship you have with your son who's in heaven now, because of the breakdown of the relation you have with his father, yada yada. And so I think he's trying to bring back, or maybe try to read, which is just to say, this is just what love is. I mean,
but it's love is an epistemology here.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, no, I think that's right.
Her question is like, what is the meaning of my son? Right? What world do I live in where he's gone? It's meaningless. It's nothing. And what's so great is Zosima tells him sort of the tale of the saint saying to the mother, don't weep. Your little one is before the throne of God. Rejoice. And then she sighs, and she said, my husband said the same words, but I can't help but weep. And she shows him the sash, and then I was so moved. It's Rachel of old, said the elder, weeping for her children, and will not be comforted because they are not. Such is the lot set on earth for you mothers. Be not comforted. Consolation is not what you need. So that's such an interesting line. What is it that she needs if it's not consolation, right? She needs to still participate in the life of her son.
Yeah, and it's that, I think, because it goes on, and he says, it's those tears, the tears of love that you have for your son, which sort of reveal a loss, but also a longing for a reality. I mean,
Exactly.
it's not like utter despair, but so that there's something. It's a loss of something that's still real, still alive.
Exactly. No, it's the same. It's the same thing you brought up with beauty. Is that he helps her see that your tears are a sign of something more.
Yeah, and
not just desperation. They're not only bitterness. They're a desire for his life.
Yeah, and it's that which, as he says, is going to purify the heart and deliver it from sin. So in some ways, it's those tears, not a consolation, which will render her life perfect.
And I guess it's an interesting thing. Like, what do you think of? What would a consolation be? It would be like there, don't feel bad, your kid's in heaven, and that's like the perfect, and she says, I can't do that. Well, if you were to insist on that, that's a perfect example of ideology.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Where you say, here's the idea, and I'll just put it in place of the reality, and be comforted. But I mean, as Hemingway said, and I won't be able to quote it directly here because this is public, the greatest BS detector is the human heart. Right? And so it's so cool it's just so moving how Zosima again sort of gives space to reality. Same when he left the room. It's like, okay, no, your weeping is something deeper. You don't, it wouldn't correspond to what you're experiencing to just say there.
And he says that the weeping will become a quiet joy, as he calls it.
Yeah.
So it's not sort of a unproductive weeping, or it's not like he seems to be saying, like you're saying, it's not a denial of reality to weep. In fact, it is in some sense living in that reality and embracing what is, which is moving you towards purification and joy.
Yeah, which in the monastic tradition of weeping, of holy tears, is exactly what it is. It's never it's never pure desolation or bitterness at sort of my own fallenness and sins. I mean, it has that, but it's always sweet and purifying because it's the result of encountering His mercy. So I've been recently, well, the last couple of years, I've been reading Saint Isaac of Syria.
Yeah.
I have this little daily reader that fits in a habit pocket easily. And as I read it, I'm like, wow, it's Dostoyevsky through and through. And I was reading, I forget what introduction to the book, but he apparently was actually very influenced by Saint Isaac of Syria. So you see it through and through with Zosimov. Is this sort of way of being in the world.
Wow.
Yeah, he with that woman at the end of it, he also says, I will remember him, mother, and your grief in my prayers. I will pray for your husband's health, which is the definition of an elder, one who took your soul, your will, into his soul, his will. I mean, not in a formal relationship as he has with his monks, but he carries with him the pain and the suffering of this mother going forward. He commits to that. That's part of what he's giving to her as well, as not just wisdom, but carrying her life with him.
Yeah, and he says on page 54, right near the end of chapter 3 here, he's talking to the woman who confesses what sounds like she murdered her husband, right? And he says the last thing he says to her, it looks like, he says, love is such a priceless treasure that you can redeem the whole world by it. Expiate not only your own sins, but the sins of others. That's kind of going along with what you were saying, Brother Levin, about how he takes the soul into himself. And it's really pointing back to that point you made, Jager, about about Norris Clark and this understanding of, and really the understanding of beauty, right? That we're not just individual realities that happen to be in conversation with each other at times, but that there's a real sort of like all of being is an abiding in the other, to the point that you can say things which sound scandalous to the modern Western ears, that you can expiate the sins of others by your love. Like that sounds like but they did it, not you, because there's this drastic separation, which seems to be something that Zosima is sort of correcting. There's a corrective here, that there is an abiding of others and maybe everyone, the whole world, in me, such that my love is a redemption of all of them and all of it, all of the world.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes the when everyone takes on the roles of priest, prophet, king at confirmation, baptism, both.
Both.
You don't teach theology.
I know we take them on. I know we take them on. Yeah. But so in some sense, like to be a Christian is to live the life of Christ, which is to take on all sin, the whole world, and to out and in love, through love, to redeem it. Right. So I think this just is the life of Christ, and it therefore just is the life of the Christian. This is what it is to live the Christian life, is to see the whole, take everyone's soul into your own, and to redeem it out of your suffering, your love.
Yeah. Yeah, he says right above that, actually. So we were talking about how lying to yourself makes you incapable of loving. Here, when he talks to this woman who murdered her husband, he says that God loves you with your sin. God loves you in your sin. And a little bit lower than that, he says, if you are penitent, you love. And if you love, you are of God. All things are atoned for. All things are saved by love. So there's this idea that lying to yourself makes you incapable of loving. Penitence for man, who is himself always, in a sense, a redeemed sinner, penitence is love in
Yeah.
some
Yeah.
way, is how
So-
he defines it.
Yeah, and this woman is afraid to die, right? And I think what Zosima is saying is you shouldn't be afraid to die because you love much, and that you love much because you are deeply penitent, right? So I think what he's saying is that fear actually isn't really founded, and in some sense what's the real emotion that's going on here is penitence, and you should not interpret that or understand that as a fear, but as actual love. And so he's trying to like transfigure that that emotion, it seems. Yeah, which carries to the next chapter with Madame Hoklikov, who also is afraid to die, but she's kind of a interesting piece of work.
Yeah, he deliberately juxtaposes their faith.
Mhm.
Chapter 3 is peasant women who have faith. Chapter 4 is a lady of little faith.
Yeah.
I think it.
And she committed murder, the first one.
Right. Well, this time around, I realized how significant that encounter is because, the book is superficially about murder.
Yeah.
And so the way in that moment, it sort of resolves or shows you how to read the heart, which is going to be tormented for the next 1,000 pages.
I think I mentioned this to Jeremy, but this book I think really should be read twice because it's such a long book. You kind of forget a lot. But when you get to the middle chapters, when you get the life of Father Zosima, and then you go back to these conversations he's having here, especially with this woman, you realize what is Zosima thinking, so to speak, in this conversation, in light of him knowing his own life and his own struggles and what have you. I don't want to give anything away, but
Well, he says something
it's
about
worth
himself.
jumping back and forth with these encounters. And
the one sentence in that section that I didn't read, right before what I first read about love and right after what I read about penitence, he says, "If I, a sinner, even as you are, am tender with you and have pity on you, how much more will God?" Right. So there's already this kind of recognition of his own sinfulness that he points to here as a sign of God's own love, right? Because look at me, look at how I'm treating you.
Yeah.
And I'm a loser.
It's like, if I can forgive you.
Yeah. God's not a loser. His love's better than mine. Yeah. I think there's something drastic about that, right?
Yeah.
In some sense, it's the way that everybody learns about love, right? Because who are you loved by in a concrete way? That you see, that it's the sinner around you, right?
Yeah.
And so I think God's love is revealed in the love of the sinner for another.
Can I share something? Can I go extra textual and share something from Zosima?
Always welcome.
Yeah.
Always
the
welcome.
prototype of Zosima of St. Isaac of Syria.
Yeah.
He has this amazing thing on our weakness and God's help. So he says, "Blessed is the person who knows his own weakness, because the awareness of this becomes for him the foundation and beginning of all that is good and beautiful. For whenever someone realizes and perceives that he is truly and indeed weak, then he draws in his soul from the diffuseness which dissipates knowledge," so it's a question of knowledge again, "and he becomes all the more watchful of his soul. But no one can perceive his own weakness," this gets to what you were saying, Jager, after you read the whole book, "unless he has been remiss a little, has neglected some small thing, has been surrounded by trials, either in the subject of things which cause the body suffering, or in that of ways in which the soul is subject to passions. Only then, by comparing his own weakness, will he realize how great is the assistance which comes from God." And then he goes on, but it ends with this amazing line: "As long as the heart is not humbled, it cannot cease from wandering, for humility concentrates the heart."
Mm-hmm.
And the more you spend time with Zosima and his history, the more you realize that Dostoyevsky is not creating a poster child, rouged up saint picture, right? This
But
is
but
and
but
even before,
but he
even
is,
now,
right? Because that's what he sees as the saint, is the penitent, right?
yeah, no, I mean a sort of, ersatz sentimental saint.
Yeah.
But even now, if you're reading it for the first time, you can't help but be moved by him.
Mhm.
There's something exceptional about him, even if you don't know explicitly the history. It's clear he has this great tenderness and this great sort of awareness of his own, smallness, kind of. Like he says at the beginning before the meeting, like who am I to be their judge, right? He has this perpetual smile, this sort of he's aware of kind of the ridiculous of the human condition because he knows himself.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. So every transition from one peasant to another, he always leaves, and it makes a comment about him either smiling or being cheerful,
Yeah.
or I made deliberate note of the number of times Dostoyevsky said things like, he spoke softly, he was cheerful, he smiled.
Yeah.
I mean, it's certainly deliberate that he wants Zosima to come off as not a judge of another, right? But a sort of a welcoming taking in, even of like the worst sinner, doesn't matter.
So going into chapter 4, what do you guys think is the difference? Why do the peasant women have faith, and why is she called a person of little faith, the lady who comes? Because he wants us to compare that. He wants us to look, okay, what's the essential difference in their attitude?
Well, so she, I mean, I don't really know, but I thought it was interesting that she said she lacked faith in God, or Zosima says, you lack faith in God, and she says, oh, no, this is the bottom of page 57 of this. It's, I don't know, maybe about 2 or so pages in. Oh, no, I dare not even think of that, but in the future life, it is such an enigma, and no one can solve it. And she kind of goes on to talk about how she's worried that when she dies, there's all that is going to be just, flowers growing on her grave and what have you.
Which is like the Dostoyevsky question. Right?
Yeah, and so she says, "Oh no, I have perfect faith in God, but I'm actually worried about what's going to happen to me when I die." And I think that's just the most Tollens. You have complete faith and love, but yet like you don't really have faith and love, because I think what's with the peasants is that they are confident by the love that they have for, say, their dead children or what have you, that there's something more going on here. So it's sort of in this real love, something is revealed beyond death. And this lady says, oh no, I love the people, I love the peasants, and I have good faith in God. I just don't know if there's anything beyond this. So I think it's you'll know a tree by its fruits, and it's sort of fear of death seems to be this indicator of a lack of love. At least that's the way I was thinking of it.
Yeah. No, and the sort of the moniker she is given is she's a sentimental lady. Right from the beginning. I'm trying to find it. But yeah, she was a sentimental lady, society lady of genuinely good disposition in many respects. And so she it's another moment of a very clear example of ideology, right? Where
it goes on. I mean, that's exactly it, brother. I love the people myself. I want to love them. And who could help loving them in the splendid Russian people, so simple in their greatness. And like she knows that this is like the good thing to do, is to love the simple people like Zosima, but she just doesn't really love them because
she loves her. She loves her own image of the people.
Uh-oh.
They're a simple, generous people, right? People, they're these wonderful, noble, and these kind of grand, descriptions, but they're just whatever that person's idea is. But Zazimov just counseled someone who killed her husband, for crying out loud, right? And he received that,
Right.
right? So she has this great sentimentality, and I love the phrase. It's where is it? Where she's like, I would love to give myself, basically as a sister of mercy, and it will be wonderful, but I'm just afraid people wouldn't be grateful enough.
Yeah.
And where is that? Because it's one of the great lines in the book where he says it's one thing to love humanity and it's another thing to love humans.
He's quoting someone. But I wonder at myself, the more I love humanity in general, the less I love man in particular. Is that?
Oh, is that later?
That's where she's saying.
Oh yeah, that's right. I'm trying to.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's quoting a doctor. I love humanity, but I wonder at myself, the more I love humanity.
Go back, I just caught you. It's up that way.
Oh, here we go. Yeah.
Yeah, the doctor says he's incapable of living in the same room with anyone for 2 days together.
Yeah, and later on, one of the lines that I remembered from this book, from reading it 13 years ago, is Ivan says you should love humanity with a newspaper in front of you. Or beggars should ask for money with a newspaper in front of them, because getting too close is just it destroys the charity.
Yeah.
It's the same idea that when you come up against a particular, it's unlovable.
Yeah.
This is like, have you guys read Infinite Jest, the David Foster Wallace novel? There's this amazing moment. There's a character who's this sort of deformed cripple. He's very, very good natured, and he does this thing where he stands outside the subway and he just holds his hand out. Oh no, what is it? Maybe he just shakes people's hands and he just says hello. And he's clearly this, he looks like a beggar and he looks atrocious and everything. And he said people would want to give me money, but they wouldn't touch my hand.
Uh-huh.
And he said all they want, and basically it's this moment of what was desired is this transaction of I feel good now, I've done the thing, but don't make me look at you, don't make me touch you in your ugliness.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I think she's touching on that, and so that's why Zosima says, okay, there's one way you can be convinced of love, basically, is active love by the experience. Well, no, by the experience of active love.
Yeah. Strive
to love your neighbor actively and oh gosh, I know that word. Indefatigably. I can't say it. And as far as you advance in love, you will grow sure of the reality of God and of the immortality of your soul. Right. So again, this question, it's the immortality of the soul is the question of God, and God is the question of immortality of the soul. If you attain to perfect self-forgetfulness in the love of your neighbor, then you will believe without a doubt, and no doubt can possibly enter your soul. This has been tried. This is certain, right? So this is sort of his solution to the question of death and a love that's greater than death is you have to experience active love.
Yeah.
Yeah, an active love has to happen between particulars, right? So you can't love the abstract neighbor. So I think this is highlighting once again the importance of being able to see in the world, in the fleshy, something more. Not like forget what's before me and look to something beyond, but this is why I think the image of the bow is so important throughout this book. It's sort of a recognition of the incarnation and sort of seeing meaning in the earth, rather than we need to look to something abstract, look to something beyond an ideal, and that's what we bow to. But if we truly are Christians and believe in the incarnation, it's actually the ideal has been made incarnate, and so you bow to it before you. So I think this is just brought out so clear here that she's actually turning away from love to try to arrive at like real love, to arrive at immortality or an understanding of immortality, and that's just not a possibility.
And you see Zosimov doing this with her, right? It's he doesn't brush her off. I mean, she's kind of this. I mean, it takes a saint to endure a conversation like this, right? but he says, don't distress yourself about my opinion of you. I quite believe in the sincerity of your suffering, right? So he starts from what's real, not just her sentimentalities. It's like, no, you are suffering, and I believe that. So I thought that was, you see sort of his way of always embracing the person in front of him.
Mm-hmm. I think it really gets his explanation to her at the end, I think, is really helpful, and it gets right to this point of incarnationality. 2 pages later on our page 60, he says, I can say nothing more consoling to you, for love in action is harsh and dreadful thing compared with love in dreams.
Yeah.
Love in dreams is greedy for immediate action, rapidly performed and in the sight of all. Men will give even their lives if only the ordeal does not last long, but is soon over, with all looking on and applauding as though on the stage. But active love is labor and fortitude, and for some people too, perhaps a complete science. But I predict that just when you see with horror that in spite of all your efforts, you're getting further away from your goal instead of nearer to it, at that very moment, I predict that you will reach it and behold clearly the miraculous power of the Lord, who has been all the time loving and mysteriously guiding you. I think that last line especially, this great contrast between love in dreams, and love in action, but then this idea of, and this is all right after he's hitting her hard with this knowing yourself thing and never lying to yourself, that when you recognize that you're failing and that you're getting further from the goal instead of nearer to it, it's then that you actually attain it, right? Because, and maybe it goes back to what you were saying, your quote from Isaac the Syrian, is that who it was?
Yeah, Saint Isaac of Syria.
Yeah, and his explanation of knowing your weakness, right? It's when you recognize and admit to yourself your failure, which he kind of draws out of her throughout this, right?
So go like 2 or 3 lines above, or sentences above where you just read. This is apparently a great Zosimanian theme.
Zosimanian.
Yeah. Above all, avoid falsehood, every kind of falsehood, especially falseness to yourself. Watch over your own deceitfulness and look into it every hour, every minute, right? I mean, once again, it's the exact same thing that that he said to Fyodor.
Yeah.
I mean, like, how do I attain eternal life? This is the exact same prescription. Right? It's about being true. This sounds so hippie. Being true to yourself.
Isn't that what Polonius says to Laertes as he's going off to college or something? But it's supposed to be a farce, right? And he's like, be true to thine own self, be true, right? But it's supposed to be a joke because he's like such a conniving loser. But
even a stop clock is right twice a day. You know? And I think partly, that's Dostoyevsky really puts that in front of us, is that, a buffoon, a murderer, all these different people can be instruments of revealing the truth to us. Mm-hmm. So this is my 3rd time reading this book, and I'll tell you, the first 2 times with this performance by Fyodor, I just cringed. I'm like, I know it's supposed to be funny, but like, this is crazy.
Yeah.
But this time around, I was just, Brother Levin and I were just talking about this. I was laughing. I mean, it's hilarious and ridiculous. And so I've slowly, as I've read it, I've slowly moved from like the Alyosha, like this is a disaster, to like the curiosity of Zossimov, and like there's something going on here. And
can I make a comment? I want to bring something up to have you guys talk about, especially the brothers here. This is in the Old Buffoon. This is going back a little bit to the Old Buffoon chapter. It's I don't know, maybe 3 pages in or so. I'll just read it and maybe you can find it contextually.
Sure.
What was taking place in the cell was really incredible. For 40 or 50 years past, from the times of former elders, no visitors had entered that cell without feelings of the profoundest veneration. Almost everyone admitted to the cell felt that a great favor was being shown him. Many remained kneeling during the whole visit. Of those visitors, many had been men of high rank and learning, some even free thinkers, attracted by curiosity, but all, without exception, had shown the profoundest reverence and delicacy. For here there was no question of money, but only, on the one side, love and kindness, and on the other, penitence and eager desire to decide some spiritual problem or crisis. And I think this is a really interesting sort of commentary on the buffoonery that's happening. Like Dostoyevsky's maybe highlighting something significant is going on in the monastery, which has never before happened. So I get the impression that this has more to do with what does it mean to be a reverential place or thing in the world. And it looks like there's nothing of reverence for these people here. Mm-hmm. Even the free thinkers of old would have found this to be a great place to be. So I don't know, any thoughts as to what this passage sort of means, either in the context of the book or in the context of maybe modernity?
I think one thing it does, the whole is, well, it again sets up a contrast, right? So it's interesting in these chapters that he's asking us to make comparisons: little faith, no faith, people coming in with a reverence for the elder, people who are obviously not, and any comparison, right, asks you to find the difference, right? So I think this goes back to the question at the beginning of the book is, what is, in the whole book, is what is faith? And what is, and miracles don't come, does faith come from miracles, or do miracles come from faith? Mm-hmm. Right? So he's showing us there's a huge contrast here. And so we're given a moment to see, okay, will this envelop sort of the holiness, the thing that makes the difference? Or is it going to help it make it clear what is it that's exceptional about Zosima? What is it that's exceptional about his way of looking at reality? Which is the beginning of faith, to recognize that and follow that. So I think it gives us a moment to sort of enter into everything that's stripped away. There won't be any common agreement on what makes the difference, right? There won't be. There'll be even ridicule as far as the ways we talk about it, and so it highlights that, like, Zosimov is not just a product of a sort of monastic environment, so to speak, right? So it's not just a sentimental thing, and it's also not it's not a product of sort of ecclesial power, so to speak. It's not a sort of cynical proposition that, like, you're here, you did things on my terms, I'm going to tell you what to do, and you should reverence me. So I think he's saying, look, it's neither sentimentality nor cynicism that makes the difference. So what is it?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think also, just Brother Angelos, the way you put it about Dostoyevsky setting up comparisons, I think that's dead on. What remains the same, in both settings, with the people who hyperbolically reverence Zosima in some ways, and the people who make a complete mockery of him. In both scenes, he has the same compassionate, gentle love. It's not a show. It perdures in different contexts, vastly different contexts. And then his teaching, as we've already pointed out, is remarkably similar. He says to Fyodor, "Don't be ashamed," and that's another way of, or links up with "Don't be afraid," which is what he says to a couple of the peasants. And he also tells them not to be false to one another. So the solidity and stability of Zosima's gentle, holy, exceptional character, I think is also on display in both those scenes. And again, if you want to take what is the exact opposite of hyperbolic reverence for him, it would be what Fyodor and Yasava are doing in mocking him and making a mockery of his invitation and his hosting them.
And I think too, like the question of modernity. I mean, there's nothing as far as sort of the free thinkers and other people who come. I don't think there you see anything to specifically hyperbolic, other than they recognize there's something kind of amazing about this person. So there's like a good reverence. No one would say that'd be a bad thing, or the reverence that the monks show for him or Alyosha. But we can't take any of that for granted anymore, right? Who says, someone later, in here says, like, in the age of steamships and railroads, like none of this matters, which is a funny thing to say, but it's also like, yeah, that's where we are. Is none of the churches, none of what we say, none of what the truth of what the church is in the presence of Christ on earth is, can be taken for granted anymore. Right? It's all back to it's the signs don't signify anymore. Right? So the bow doesn't. We don't understand the meaning of that unless we've had an experience of it, like him and some of his monks. But for pretty much for the world, it doesn't mean anything anymore, and it's all viewed through this lens of cynicism, and money, power. And so, like, to reinforce, to say, okay, no, we're going to do more pomp and circumstance, it wouldn't help, right? So this is the position of the Church of modernity. So you have to start at the heart again. You can't assume. You have to rediscover the meaning of the signs.
Because the hope, the one hope that can never be, that man could never like lose the sight of, in some sense. I'm thinking of Schindler's book that we read, Jager, for your class, where he says, even the most flesh-bound eyes, there's still hope to see beauty. And I think the one hope is that, and this is what I think maybe Dostoyevsky's whole point in the character of Zosima is that the one hope is love. That's not it's not an iconic thing that could be like unseen, perhaps. Like the bow, yes, it's all show. The habits all show, like you can think that, but to see someone who loves, it's impossible to deny that, and it's kind of like what Zosima says to the Lady of Little Faith about how there's no proof. There is no proving it, meaning the future life, though you can be convinced of it by the experience of active love, and I wonder if the experience of active love is the ultimate, in a sense, I don't want to use this word, I'm putting quotes around it, argument for the reality that's beyond the mere materialist. Or something like that.
Andy, lead with thought.
The way I was thinking, I was kind of thinking about this in terms of for these people, the question of God isn't even a question, so that it's not. There's no point of even asking the question about does God exist, does immortality exist, and later on you'll get the Ivan bringing up the without God everything's permissible, so there's really no goodness. whereas even before, even the free thinkers, and even in some broad sense, the atheists of old still believed in something like an uber God, if you wanted to put it that way. They still believed in a truth or wisdom, something to commit one's life to. And the free thinker was sort of journeying through life, trying to figure out what to commit their life to. And that seems to be just completely gone here. This is all that we have is like buffoonery. There aren't any real questions or any real like searching for anything. It's just, so I was kind of thinking this is, you know, I mean, you get the contrast. I think I think you're right. That's definitely on the table, but it's kind of the contrast of a seeking or the contrast of just like a nothingness, like all there is buffoonery, and therefore it's just complete lying to oneself. There is no truth. It's just lies. So I don't know. I was thinking that this is a ties up with this theme that's going to kind of play out with what does life look like without God? That's without love.
Mm-hmm. And there is another contrast that, as you were talking, where you were saying, made me think of the chapter title, right? The old buffoon, is the idea of buffoonery is sort of like jesting for the sake of joy and happiness, and having happiness at the expense of the world, which is meaningless anyway. Mm-hmm. Whereas real happiness, Zosima, is sort of the contrast of that, right? So Fyodor is the buffoon who's trying to make jokes of everything, but not really laughing, and nobody's really happy. But he, as he says to the Lady of Little Faith here, Madam, what's her face? He says, page 57, right? As she's kind of talking about, she talks to him, she says, I thought you were sick. You look so well, so gay and happy. He says, I'm extraordinarily better today, but I know that it's only for a moment. I understand my disease now thoroughly. If I seem so happy to you, you could never say anything that would please me so much. For men are made for happiness. And anyone who is completely happy has a right to say to himself, I am doing God's will on earth. All the righteous, all the saints, all the holy martyrs were happy. That I think there's a contrast there that I didn't see before, that a true happiness happens in the midst of love, which is demonstrated by his own tenderness, his own smiling, his own cheerfulness. And it's the opposite of kind of what Fyodor is doing in his buffoonery, which is to make a joke of all things. But making a joke of all things actually does not bring mirth, right? Like is intended.
Any final thoughts?
Parting thoughts.
Well, thanks for the invitation. First of all, I've really enjoyed being part of this, and listening to what you guys have had to say. Yeah, just want to keep reading along with you.
Keep plowing.
Keep it up. All right. Well, we'll after another 500 emails, we'll figure out another time.
Oh, it's Friday though, right? Friday at 3.
Friday at 3.
Okay.
When this will be posted, I don't know, but Friday at 3 is when we're going to do it. And we're going to finish up chapter or book 2, right? But by Sunday, where are we reading through? I have it right here, actually.
So yeah.
Read through book 3, chapter 3 by Sunday for all of you out there in internet land.
Out in the void.
Yeah, out in the void that are trying to live authentically this summer. We're going to read through chapter 3 of book 3, right? Our next podcast will probably only get up to the end of book 2. So if you see the next podcast and you haven't read book 3 yet, don't worry. We're not going to talk about it yet. Listen away. So. All right.
Well, thanks again, brothers.
Yeah. Thanks for zooming.
Zooming up.
I was going to say coming, but it's not coming. It's zooming.
Yeah. All right. See you later.